أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Best of Both Worlds, a show where we discuss contemporary youth issues and we like to explore these issues by giving practical examples which can benefit us all, inshallah. As you may know, due to recent attacks that have occurred in the past couple of weeks, we see that the issue of evil is continuing to rise, especially against the Muslims around the world. One must ask as to why evil even exists, and therefore an important topic of discussion today will be as to why does this concept of evil and suffering happens in our daily lives. In light of recent activities such as the New Zealand attack which has happened, and the rise of knife crime all over the UK, the Dutch shooting which happened just a few days ago, the following questions come to our mind. How does a just God allow such things to occur? Why does evil even exist? What can we as individuals do to keep away from evil and suffering? Are there any supplications left by our Imams and the Holy Prophet and in the Quran that we can use to try avoid being put into evil, being put in that situation of suffering? With all these calamities happening around the world, such as the rise of poverty, the rise of illnesses, the rise of disunity, and the rise of the far right especially, inshallah we will explore all these later on in our discussion today. These questions and more will be looked at in this program in the following way. Firstly, we look to discuss what would push someone to be unjust and unfair in the first place. Secondly, what are some of the attributes that our Creator has? Thirdly, how does a just God allow such things to happen? And fourthly, what can we as individuals do to stay away from evil and to avoid suffering, and what is Islam's solution to suffering? I'd like to welcome to our show our honourable guest, Sayyid Zafar Abbas. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Now firstly, Sayyid, we see that evil and sufferings happening quite a bit recently, especially portrayed in the media. We'll go on to looking at Islamophobia and whether that's actually on troll at the moment. But recently it's looking at this far right extremists and coming out, and the media actually provoking and showing more of the far right than the good which is out there, who actually cause some of the triggerings that happen. I'd like to ask the first question: what would push someone or a group to be unjust or unfair in the first place?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. This is a very important topic, a very important discussion. There's a number of factors why an individual might be drawn towards violence. Okay, so first of all, everybody knows innately within their own innate nature, whether there's any religious beliefs, guidance, societal influence or not, everybody knows that taking somebody else's life is wrong. Okay, and within every society, within every culture, within every religion, this is something which is known to be wrong. There's no debate about this. For example, there's no culture which would say that to kill anybody who is innocent, who is defenseless, who's not fighting you, is justified. No religion, no culture, no idea, no society considers that to be the case. Number one. So therefore, if you got somebody who is indiscriminately killing people, like we saw, for example, in this attack in New Zealand, that 2 different mosques, whilst people had just finished praying, indiscriminately they got killed and fired on, and they died. So how does a person get to that point? Number one, question is regarding why is there such accessibility for people to get weapons that could kill people in that way, number one. Number two is that there is a factor of how society and particularly the media, particularly the influential people in that society, how they portray different groups of people. Okay, that is another factor. There's another factor which is to do with the way that violence is portrayed within society. Okay, so the first time that you see something like that, you see violence, you see, forget killing, the first time, for example, a child sees that somebody is hitting somebody else, that child becomes agitated because they innately are designed to remove themselves from conflict. But if you keep on portraying that violence in front of somebody and then you normalize that behavior, number one, then that person becomes numb to the effect of that violence, number one. Number two, if you then put in the idea that there's some groups of people who are less human, who deserve less, who don't have the right to life, to dignity, to families, to live in this particular place the way that another group does, or the way that the majority group does, for example, then by dehumanizing a whole group of people, you're able to justify the violence against them. So that's number three. Then we have, for example, the role of video games, of violence being normalized. So there's games, for example, where people can simulate killing people. There's games where people can simulate being in a war zone, so on and so forth. And that normalizes that kind of behavior. That if I can press a button to kill people in a simulation, then I'm normalizing that in my head, in my mind, that killing someone is not a big deal. It's not something that's very significant or important. So that all of these together, when they come together, then you have the reason of economic deprivation. You have the reason of social or loss of identity. So for example, you're in a place where there is where you feel or you perceive that you're losing out on some economic benefits from that society due to another group of people who've come
mental
to that
health
life.
as well.
Mental health issues are certainly a part of it, but and we'll come to that in a bit actually, that it's convenient that mental health issues are raised only in some occasions, on some situations, but not on other situations. So not all killers are considered equal or presented equally when it comes to the media, and we'll come to that inshallah later on in the show regarding the portrayal of how people are. But all of these things all together lead to a person being more inclined to committing these acts. Okay, and then so all of these things together are responsible for creating a atmosphere which would lead to a person finding the justification to kill a mass group of people. Of course, in the end, the responsibility is with that individual, but all of these are contributing as factors to lead that person to commit the act.
Okay, thank you. Going on to the next question, it's slightly different from this, but I want to introduce Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into our conversation. If you can start by telling us some of the attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, because I think this is an important topic, and with this discussion the best thing would be to start off with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his attributes.
Absolutely. So if we reflect on the Quran and on the riwayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhi, we'll find that, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everything in the world on the basis of justice. And what justice means here is not just the justice that we think of when we're talking about from a legal point of view, but in reality what we're talking about is justice in its most basic definition, which is that everything is put in its correct place, in its proper place. Okay? So, for example, the earth needs this much water, it needs this many natural resources, it needs this many things in order to make sure that everybody on earth is satisfied and gets what they need. Okay? So all of those things have been provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The food, the water, the air, all the essentials that a human being needs. Okay. Now, what has been left as the choice of the human being is how we act and behave. Okay. In that regard, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us free will on the basis that whatever action that you do, whatever action that you commit, you are doing that on the basis of your own volition. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you that capability to choose, to decide what is right and wrong. He's given you conscience, He's given you guidance, He's given you holy texts, prophets, imams, all of these. In the end, after all of that, in the end, the decision to choose what to do is your own. Okay? So this is number one. Now, when we come to attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He's just and that He is kind. Okay. So then question, why is there that evil exists in society if He's just and He's kind? So here, this is the...
that was my next question to ask.
So this is what we want to...
How does a God that we love most dearly, we pray to, we ask for blessings, we ask for forgiveness, and we hope we get return, and of course we do, how can He keep us protected and allow us sufferings to happen when they're happening at the moment in today?
Right. So if we reflect on the suffering, okay, that how is it possible that God, who is loving, who is just, and then there's still suffering in this world? Okay. So question, and perhaps we reflected on this in an earlier show as well, but it's worth repeating because it's relating to our topic here. And that is that a conversation between me and God. This is thought up in light of riwayat, that I said, or I asked the question, that how is there so much suffering in this world when God exists? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So God replied. What did He reply? He replied, I created you. And you have the ability to stop that from happening.
SubhanAllah.
Right? Why? Because you are my agent on this earth. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, number one, His primary agent, of course, are the prophets, the imams, and Him. But in a general sense, all human beings are His agent. Right? Are His manifestation of His perfection. Okay? Now that means that human beings have this responsibility. Why? Because they have free will. Right? God is not interfering in my life. We are not robots that God is programmed my life and everything that He wants is happening. No. Then there's no accountability in that, because I'm a robot. But if I have free will, then I have accountability. When you did something, you didn't do something, you have to be accountable for that. Okay? And similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look, I'm not going to intervene to stop, because this is the result of your own actions. Okay? For example, so if we look at the violence, for example, and we gave the examples of that, right? That the media has a role in that, video games has a role in that, society has a role in that. All of these are made by whom? Human beings. Right? God did not make video games, and He did not make the media to be in that particular way, nor did He create society in such a way that would incline somebody towards violence. But all of these things were created by other human beings who made it an environment for that person to be affected and to react in that way. So ultimately, responsibility comes down to human beings. That we have a responsibility to fix the society. We have the responsibility to make sure that we understand the consequences of our actions, and we have a responsibility to hold every person to account personally. Right? Even after all of that, that person is accountable. Why? Because, for example, we have the video games, we have the society, we have the discontent, but everybody doesn't go around killing people.
Yeah.
Right?
So basically, what you're trying to say is this is a challenge to us. If God created everyone in the same manner, that they all just commit good deeds and there was no such thing as evil, which is going on to our next question. If there was no such thing as equal, surely this wouldn't even be a test for us.
Right.
And
absolutely. No, number one, that is the case. Number two, we mention in philosophy and also in Kalam that the way to recognize things is through their opposites. Okay? We recognize light because there's darkness. We recognize heat because there's cold. We recognize, tastes because there's the opposite of it. So we recognize them through the opposites. Okay, we recognize white because there's black, and black because there's white. Okay, so similarly, we recognize good because of evil, because whatever is not good is evil. Okay, so we recognize the good through the existence of evil. Number one. Number two, when there is free will from God, then it is natural that there will be people who would be inclined towards evil. Okay? Why? Because in every time, okay, and this is not even about the earth, in the heavens, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the angels to bow down, everyone bowed down except for Iblis. Okay? So by that action of Iblis, we recognize the good of all the angels. Okay? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threw him out of his mercy, of his dominion, and so on and so forth. So this is to give, and this story is mentioned right at the beginning of the Holy Quran, to tell us the importance of recognizing all of these things, that this is the good, this is the evil, and this exists due to their volition, not because God forced that person to become evil or forced that person to be good. No, if that was the case, then there's no challenge, there's no accountability of that person. We turn around Day of Judgment and say that on Day of Judgment we would say that we were forced to do this. We had no accountability, we had no capability of our own selves to do anything or to not do anything. We were just forced. We were part of this matrix and game.
Is teaching us, basically.
Right.
I think an analogy comes to mind when a swimming instructor instructs their students. What they do is they chuck them in the deep end.
Right.
And only by chucking them in the deep end, the students realize how difficult it is.
Absolutely.
And what the challenges are. And by only going into the deep end, they figure out what they need to do and they improve themselves. And I guess that's what Allah has portrayed to us. He's put us in this universe, and it is a mercy for us to be existing, like you've said.
Absolutely. So this existence comes with this challenge, right? Now this challenge is to see whether I would do the right thing and be a good person, or do the wrong thing and be the bad person. Okay? I have that choice. I can make that choice at any time to be a good person, to be an evil person. I can go from an evil person to a good person, or from a good person to an evil person, and that is all within my own capability. I have the choice. Every time, nobody is forcing me to make any choices. I have the choice to do the right thing or to not. Okay? So this is very important. Ultimately, yes, all of these things are factors that influence our lives, right? If I grow up in a loving home, I'm going to be I'll have a different perspective of life compared to if I grow up in a home, alayadu billah, which is not loving, which doesn't give any love. Or if I grow up in a broken home, or if I grow up in a home, alayadu billah, where the parents are addicts, for example. All of these things will have influence on my life. But ultimately, I cannot blame any of those things on my own life. Yes, they will have influence on my life.
Free will.
But I have choice to fix my own life at any point in my life. Right? That capability has been given to me by God.
So say, what can we do as individuals to stay away from suffering? Is there an Islamic perspective? Is there an Islamic solution to suffering? Is there any supplications which we can...
Right, I mean, there's loads and loads of supplications regarding how to protect oneself from evil, suffering, so on and so forth. We'll discuss a couple of them in a moment. But we also have to understand that there are reasons behind suffering. Okay, so for example, if we want to see whether this suffering is something that's beneficial for me or not, then I should see that whether this suffering is bringing me closer to God or further away from God. If it's bringing me closer to God, then it's a blessing. Why? Because through that suffering, through that evil that's happened to me, I've come closer to God.
On that point, just quickly, what we find is even an atheist, when he's put on their deathbed, they reach out to something which they've never reached to before, and it opens their eyes, and they start to think that there is actually something out there.
Absolutely.
And that change happens almost instantly.
We have this narration very, very well known from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, that an atheist came to him and he said to him that prove to me that God exists. So Imam asked him, what are you? What do you do for a living? So he said, I'm a mallah. Mallah is the person who steers the ships. So Imam alayhi salam asked him, he said, you drive the ships. So has there ever been a time where you've been on the ship and a storm comes? So he said, yeah, many times. Obviously it's normal for someone to be at sea and for there to be storms. There are storms all the time, especially at sea. So Imam asked him, he said, when that storm happened, recall that time when there was a storm and you were about to drown. He said, yes, this happened many times, that there was a storm and I felt like I was about to drown. He said, when you were about to drown, you felt that there was something that could save you. He said, yes. He said, that something is God.
Subhanallah.
That thing that you had hope in when you were about to drown, that is God. Okay? So, like you said, like when you get to a deathbed, even the people who rejected God in their whole lives, they realize that no, there's something greater out there. Okay? So this is number one, that if it's bringing me closer to God. If it's taking me away from God, then that means it's a test to see whether I'm going away from God in this suffering. Am I going to come back to God or not? Okay? Because this suffering is taking me away from God. And this is number two. Now, for example, supplications, there's many supplications. Like Imam ﷺ says, hadith very well known in Kamaluddin, that pray for my reappearance. Well, our total Imam ﷺ says, pray for my reappearance. Why? Because it's in your benefit. It's for your own good. Because if I reappear by the hukm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I'm going to fill the world with justice and equity, remove the injustice. So that's the benefits for you. Okay? So he says, pray for my reappearance because your salvation, your good is within that praying for my reappearance. Also, all the du'as that are associated with the authority Imam, the ones that we read regularly. For example, Allahumma kulli waliyaka al-hujjat and Ilahi Azman Bala, and all the other Imams that are associated with that authority. All of these du'as is mentioned in all of these du'as, that if you recite all of these du'as whenever you're going through difficulty or calamity or anxiety or worry, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove that from you. Why? Because you're building a connection with the Imam. And Imam is the manifestation of the grace of God. Okay? His existence is the manifestation of the grace of God.
Subhanallah.
So by building connection with him, you will also receive some of that grace, and that will remove your suffering, or that will alleviate your suffering. Okay, so all of these du'as,
Ayatul Kursi as well.
Ayatul Kursi,
the one my mum always tells me.
all of these things are, any part of the Holy Quran. Why? وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We have revealed the Holy Quran as a cure and a mercy for the believers. So anything from the Holy Ayatul Kursi particularly, obviously, but anything from the Holy Quran. Because Allah is saying this Quran, what is it? It's a cure. Cure meaning what? Meaning from all these,
it's His word.
All these worries and anxieties and problems and evils that we have. This is a cure. Shifa'un wa rahmatun lil mu'minin. It is a cure and a mercy for all those who believe. Okay? So the condition is to believe. As long as one believes, then inshallah ta'ala that is a mercy and a cure for a person to recite the Holy Quran, to build connection with the Imam alayhi salatu. These things are what helps and what creates hope. Why? This is the identity of Tashayyu, of Shia Islam. Why? That we are the madhab, we are the school of thought of Islam that is built on hope.
SubhanAllah.
Why? Because we have an Imam who's going to come. Right? That Imam is alive, he is well, he knows all of my situation. Everything that I'm going through, everything that's happening to me is in his knowledge, in his capabilities, in his. So that is hope for me, that he's going to come and one day he's going to make it right? And this hope is what is very important. Why? Because becoming hopeless is haram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to lose hope in my mercy is haram. To be hopeless is not allowed.
On this point,
yes,
just there, we're going to quickly take a break and continue from the verse we've just mentioned on hopeless. Please join us back after the break, inshallah.